Okay. So, again, in theory, I'm here. Immediately when I hit the start streaming button, a cat appears to come chew on some wires. That's fine, though. It's kind of fun. I noticed just how quiet my microphone was last time. So I tried to adjust for that. The problem is I want to make sure I'm not also putting an incredible amount of buzz into the mic. I don't want to get any excess like electric buzz noise. I can like see on the mixing board that there's a little bit already. But honestly, it's so minimal that I think it's probably worth it just for the boost in volume here. Again, I am going for a somewhat particular sort of aesthetic thing here. So, of course, I have this, like, analog mic. You know, I opted against using any sort of, like, a digital USB plug-in thing. I wanted this to be as minimally techy as humanly possible, which, of course, immensely complicates things because you can't just plug and play all of this. I've needed to sort of like combine an analog system with a digital system and get it all to talk to one another and play nicely together. But again, that's all my problem. See, it's so weird because the second that I start doing this, Twitch also sends me notifications on my phone that I can like manage the stream from my phone. It's like, good lord, I already have enough devices that I'm worrying about. What is going on here? Okay. So, all that I really wanted to start out with today was, well, I thought I was going to get home from work a little bit earlier than I ended up doing, which means, hello, having a hard time hearing you. I don't know what to tell you there. I'm showing up on my end. I'm trying to talk at the correct volume. See, if I keep turning, I can turn this microphone up on my end, but as I was saying, there's an electric buzz problem. So I'm cool to turn it up, but if there's an overbearing amount of sort of microphone static noise, it might be not worth the volume increase. Although let me just bump it a little bit. We'll see what happens. Didn't have my volume all the way up. Classic. I assumed I was going to get home from work a little bit earlier, but I did not. So I had this grand plan of what I wanted to start the stream with and have it just sound totally perfect. And I played it once before I turned the camera on to discover that it's really hard and my hands hurt. So I should have done a little bit more like practice pad time. That's okay though. Again, part of the you know, aesthetic of this is that if I mess up in real time, that's just real. I have no way of hiding my mistakes. I've entitled this stream "Breaking the Law" because as I discovered when I finished the first stream, which was this past Saturday, I neglected to also record it in addition to simultaneously streaming it. So basically what that meant was that I had to pull it off of Twitch to put it on YouTube. And of course, we live in hell. So instead of just being able to claim fair use on something, right, it sort of auto flags every bit of audio that it recognizes is from a product of some kind. So, like, I'm fully within. I'm not particularly worried about this. It's within, you know, the standards that people don't really get in trouble for, because I'm transforming the work and I'm also talking and commenting on the work. But it just auto muted like 70% of the actual playing that I did, at least the playing that I did to music. So I am now getting around that through a kind of convoluted system. So it's breaking the law, but not really. There's no law breaking going on. No one investigate this. It's fine. I promise. The closest thing to an illegal substance I have on this table is coconut water. Yeah, that's about it, actually. It's nature's Gatorade, folks. This is like, I experimented over so many years, because I sweat so much when I play, with different things to drink while I was playing to reduce the exhaustion. And the only thing that works is coconut water. And I despise the taste of it. I think it tastes pretty weird, but I have no other choice. That and regular water, those are the only two things that work. Hot tea, terrible idea, just makes you sweat more. Anything cold, terrible idea, because it stops you from sweating and then you overheat. Gatorade, too many calories. Gatorade Zero, come on. Not going to do that to myself. Let's see. So, what do I have here? There's a couple of things that I thought might be interesting to talk about this week. Here's what we'll do. I wanted to show you at least one of these old instructional books that I've been very slowly working my way through. Because pretty much any of the drummers that I like have recommended this book. And so I figured it was sort of mandatory to get my hands on it. And then basically, as I started making my way through the sheet music, I discovered how useful it was, and so I kind of went on like a book buying spree. So I have a bunch of like the classic like modern drummer publications and Hudson Music, like sheet music books for drums now. But this is the one that kicked it off for me. This is by a guy named Gary Chester. He was, I think, just a session dude almost exclusively. I don't ever know that he was in a band consistently. I'm trying to think of, like, he was on a lot of like radio hit songs. Like, he's one of these players, a lot like one of Neil Peart's favorite players, a guy named Jim Keltner, where like you would never recognize Jim Keltner's playing, because he was basically just a human metronome in the era before there were programmed drums, and he just played really great metronomic time. But you would know like dozens of songs that he was on. I think Gary Chester is one of those guys. It's also a fake name. I don't know if you can tell this by the back of the book. The guy is like, I mean, like, I don't have any other. He's very Italian. I mean, this is like in another life, this is a man who owns he owns a hostel, and brings you really terrible espresso every day when you wake up, your junior year of college when you're studying abroad or something, and can't speak English, right? I think Gary Chester is like this invented name that he made up to like anglicize it. His name is, I think, something. His real name is something comical. I think it's literally like Gianni Cicerone or something like that. So he gave it the closest sort of anglicized pronunciation he could give. So he's a bit of like an eccentric weirdo guy, and that really comes out in this book, which is funny because you wouldn't really think that you can communicate a ton of personality in what's effectively, a couple dozen pages of sheet music. But it really comes through. Basically it's this, he markets it as the new breed is systems of playing. It's a set of systems for the development of your own creativity. Which is I think true. I think that's true to life marketing there. But Gaetano Cestorici, I knew it was something totally crazy. Yeah. I actually can't tell if that's a joke or if that's his real name, because I feel like it could be. I think it's a joke, but it's something equally as funny, right? He basically, like, if you dig deep enough into the sort of backlog of interviews of any player that you really like, they will all cite this book. And probably not to speak in absolutes. Yes, joke. not to speak in absolutes about an art form, but even in terms of drummers kind of born and bred in the digital era, right? Decades after this was first published. Guys like, once again, not necessarily to speak in objective terms on art, but maybe the most talented player in the world right now, Matt Garska, in Animals as Leaders, as well as a bunch of other projects. This is a guy who is equivalent to a singer who has only ever released albums in the post-auto-tune age, right? I mean, this is a guy whose drumming is basically so strongly influenced by the culture around this instrument that developed as a result of digital media, right? Like, robotically perfect time and really busy, impressive kits, and kits that are designed to be really kind of wimpy and weird looking, but that's actually because they're sort of scientifically set up, right? They're so ergonomic that they're almost like you couldn't come up with a more efficient setup. Like this is a guy who was raised in an era where basically the entire wellspring of all information that you could possibly glean about this instrument exists. It's equivalent to Ariana Grande or something like that. I mentioned her on the last stream, but for some reason when I think of like a Zoomer pop artist, that's the only person that comes to my mind, which shows that I'm getting older, because I guess she's not a Zoomer even, because I think she's older than like me. But what I mean by that is someone who has released music exclusively in the era where you can digitally perfect someone's instrument, right? Like Matt Garska is in that era of playing. He is in, weirdly, the new breed of the 21st century. Even he, if you dig around enough, he's like, oh yeah, like the new breed was totally vital. And so that to me was really interesting, because it's like, this is not like Carmine Appice's book Realistic Rock or whatever, where it's basically like telling you how to be the best musician in your bar band or something like that, where it's teaching you like really good fundamentals for basically music the way it sounded up until the year 2003 or something like that. That's not what this is. This is something that for some reason is simultaneously very bound up in the period that it was published, but also weirdly like also a book from the future or something like that, because it continues to be incredibly useful to all sorts of people when you read about where they learned to play really well. Like, I mean, you can kind of tell by the cover of this. The original copyright date on this is 1985. You can tell because this kind of looks like like Blade Runner looking or something like that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like sci-fi, but that kind of like neon sign looking aesthetic and stuff like that. Now, the funny thing about this is that getting through New Breed is like entirely dependent on a bunch of weird stuff. So basically, if you're a drummer and you look at this kit is ludicrous. And it's ludicrous in a very particular way. Like it's like the Necronomicon or something. You look at this and you just stare for long enough, and the more you're like, wait, what the fuck? like it's totally baffling the more you look at it. Like what I'm seeing, what stands out to me every time I look at this is three pairs of hi-hats. 1, 2, 3. And the amazing thing about this book is that, again, it's from an era, the last era, really, before the 21st century, where basically, like, you could just get away with all sorts of garbage in the publishing industry, because not only does Mr. Gary Ciucciaroni's kit have 3 sets of hi-hats, he has the audacity in the text of the book to recommend that before you start doing these systems, to get yourself 3 sets of hi-hats. And he has a very sort of loving explanation for this. Let's see here. My approach to drum setup. Yeah, so the first sentence of the section where he talks about the setup. In my drum setup, I use 3 hi-hats. 2 in the traditional position, and 1 on the side above the floor tom. Now, already, that's the first sentence. 2 sets of hi-hats, he says, in the traditional position. I'd just like to point out to you, I have a set of hi-hats. I only have 1. They're in the traditional position, for a lefty, at least. Where is the other traditional position? There is no other traditional position. Like the only people who have widespread use of multi hi-hat pairs are actually like metal drummers, because they'll have a traditional hi-hat on one side that they can open and close with their foot, and then they'll have a second one somewhere on the other side of the kit that they can play open-handed rather than crossing over, which is permanently closed, right? So basically, you can play really busy patterns or fast patterns and not get your hands kind of crossed up over each other, and still have a hi-hat groove rather than needing to go to a ride cymbal. So already, this man is an alien from another planet. And I would just like to emphasize the thing that is so wild about this is that this is like, he was like a session drummer for, I don't know, like Van Morrison, right? Like, I think he might have been the guy who was on like Moondance, right? The guy from Moondance begins his book telling you that you need 3 sets of hi-hats. Now, let me just remind you of what some of that playing sounds like. Does this sound like an alien? Oh, it's a marvelous night for moon and like what use does this man have for 3 sets of hi-hats? Totally psychopathic advice. And the funny thing is that this actually is a real problem, because there is no way to really accurately represent the way that some of the sheet music is written without having a ton of different sets of hi-hats to pick from. Like, the sheet music is really written with that idea in mind, that you have gone out in the days where electronic drums were in their infancy, and you went to a music store and you bought 6 discs of brass and copper, right? And you bought stands for those discs, and you set them up in pairs of 2 across your kit. You reorganized your entire kit just to be able to play this book. And I feel like that is a perfect representation, again, Necronomicon, like, of what is contained in these dread pages. Because it really does, like, if you take it seriously, it will, like, reorient your approach to, like, movement around the drums. But you also have to, like, take it seriously. So you have to buy in to this weird, I don't know, WOP, right? You have to buy into this insane Mediterranean man's vision of how to play the drums, and you have to, like, take it seriously and unironically. This is also from the days of Remo rototoms. It's funny you bring that up, because yet another thing that, if you just learn to love them unironically, are life-changing, right? I mean, I still, like, if I hear in, like, a modern prog song or something, if I hear a rototom, it's like ear candy, right? It's like, it's got, like, these qualities of, like, a steel drum, and also, like, what are the a timbale? Is that the one I'm thinking of? Is a timbale the one that there was that really famous, I don't know if he was, like, Central American, I can't remember what his nickname was. They're like stand-up drums, and they have this wonderful, like, dong, timbale. Yes, for some reason Google thought it was a food called timbale. Apparently it's also a food. Yeah, so yeah, this is from the era of those really cheesy sounding E-drum kits and rototoms and Neon, right? And Blade Runner and all this stuff. And basically, like, if you want to get maximum worth out of it, you really have to, like, take that world seriously. So basically what this book consists of is, essentially, you play an ostinato with 3 of your limbs, and then your 4th limb has a melody that changes, right? And so basically most of the sheet music in this book is essentially the melody lines. So if you're playing a consistent pattern on a cymbal, your snare, and then your hi-hat foot, your bass drum is basically playing whatever is in the sheet music here. That's the idea. And then basically on the pages preceding the sheet music, you have what the ostinatos are on the other 3 limbs. And so basically the reason that there are so many systems, right, like pages and pages of these systems, is because essentially he goes through every possible permutation of what your limbs can be doing, is essentially what happens. And so I am, like, pitifully far back in this. And the funny thing is, if you just decided to play it like a conventional thing, right? If you decided to basically, oh, well, the point here is that the bass drum is doing a really complicated thing, and it's not even really a pattern, because it's like a page of music that doesn't repeat at all. So I'm just going to play like a basic 80 BPM rock beat and then put the foot underneath it. It's like, I could probably play that without even trying, right? But basically the way that the melody interacts with the ostinato is the part that makes it hard. So let me play it like, basically, if you just played it as a basic rock groove, and let me play it with what Jerry Ciucciaroni tells you to play with it, and you can see that I will probably mess up the second variant. So Yeah, I'll play it as a basic rock groove, then I'll play it the way it's actually meant to be played as a system of what all four limbs are doing. The funny part about that is that I just set it down and started playing, not realizing that I was not actually playing the one that I had practiced for this stream. So somehow I got through that without messing up. Now I'm probably helped because I went back a level in difficulty by accident rather than forward a level in difficulty by accident. So that could have gone very poorly if it had gone the other direction. But so basically, the situation here is that was the correct pattern on the bass drum, but basically none of the other limbs were doing what he recommends that you do or says that you should do. So basically, like, the first... Can you see the cat, by the way? That's really adorable. I knew that keeping the door open was going to lead to some interesting situations. He's just back there. Do you see that? He's right. Just in case you can't tell where he is. He's right. Oh. He's he's here. Hello. He's gonna be like really shocked in a minute. So like the first thing that he recommends you do is not even to play something that complicated. Like, he starts you with, again, something extraordinarily simple that is also incredibly alien and strange, and that no modern drum teacher in their right mind would have you do. Basically, what he has you do is, the actual first thing he recommends you do is he recommends you do it slower than I just played it. And basically, what the rest of your limbs are doing is your non-bass drum foot is doing nothing. And then your left and right hands are full unaccented stroke, both hitting the closed hi-hat with no flamming, just unison hits. Weird, right? And then basically from that point, he has you do other weird stuff. So I'm still at the point where the systems that I'm playing are sort of, in theory, relatively simple. But already the simple ones get odd because essentially you master a simple one, and then the next permutation of the ostinato will be the same thing, but with all of the limbs reversed. Which is why you need the 3 pairs of hi-hats. So basically, I've had to do really bizarre things where, like, the second permutation, which I got all the way through, or no, maybe I'm on the 5th one. I think I'm actually on number 5, but no, I am. I'm on the 5th one and really struggling with it. But so, like, the second permutation, I'll just, as an example, is a much more sort of normal thing to play underneath this stuff with the bass drum. It's just this. Just quarter note stamp on the hi-hat, backbeat on the snare, unaccented hits on the cymbal. Now, of course, I don't have a second hi-hat, so I'm just putting that on the ride. But then, of course, the weird variation comes when you're playing the one after that, which basically has you do the same thing, but just with the hands reversed. Right? And so the problem with that is that you're doing that with the foot. So you can't play with your opposing hand on the hi-hat because you're not getting a close hi-hat sound because you're raising and lowering your foot. So it would be like, which in its own way is kind of groovy, right? If you play it with the backbeat. But it's also just way too disorienting because then you can't really hear if you're messing up. And the thing he encourages you to do is to play these perfectly before you move on to the next one. So basically, I've developed for these ones where you have to alternate hands to a theoretical second hi-hat that doesn't exist or whatever. I just have played this really bizarre thing instead. Because that's effectively the only way that I can even try to replicate it. But so again, that's the difficulty here, is that you're not playing like, you know, the Ringo Starr version of these things where you're all the time playing where it's just the hands are always just or if you really want to go Ringo mode, you have to swing on the hi-hat even though you're playing straight. That's a hell of a gig, by the way. You're never playing that. You're always playing some weird thing, right? So it's instead, you know, your offhand is actually playing all of the pulse notes, and then you're putting really weird stuff over top of it. So instead of it sounding like what I played a couple minutes ago, it sounds like this. And I mean, so by that definition, by Gary Ciucciaroni's definition, by Pizzaroni Pepperoni, I can't move on because, of course, I got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got like 7 lines into this, and then I like messed it up. So really, I can't move on, right? And so that's why like I'm on rotation number 5 of 39 on like page 3 of the melodies, right? And basically there are like 5 different melodies, both of which have 2 different subsections. So actually like 10 melodies, right? And then basically you're like, you reach the end of it and you're like, oh God, you know, assuming that you've mastered this and your brain has grown 10 sizes and you look like an ancient Egyptian pharaoh because your skull is now so elongated from the size of your brain, having done all of this, and you're forging all these neural connections. I imagine you reach the end of it and you're like, wow, this is amazing. I've like really gotten all the way through this, huh? But what's this? There's all these pages left in this book. And then you turn the page and you discover advanced systems. Advanced systems. At which point you discover that there are 10 more that are all insanely difficult, with, I think, 5 more melodies to master, right? It's like the sense of dread that you can develop from this is really profound. But the funny thing about it is that there's not necessarily, the dread is somewhat misplaced, because the truth of the matter is that basically you can make very little progress on this book. And basically what you will find is that with very little progress, things will start to kind of melt together in a way that's really interesting and weird, right? So basically, like, it was by the time that I got to like the end of the second rotation of ostinatos that I realized that basically like 90% of my like stick clicks, where I would accidentally smack the sticks together instead of hitting a drum when I wanted to, or when I would just get my arms completely crossed up and drop a stick, or when I would simply not aim in the middle of a head, and so even on the electronic kit, I would get like a really weak, puny sound out of it. Suddenly, like, the majority of that had gone away, and now, like, every hit that I was doing was like I was choosing between accents and non-accents and stuff like that. Like, it really does something to kind of like synthesize a lot of the different parts of your brain that are active when you're playing. It sort of helps you know ahead of time whether or not you're intending to play something that's like going to be way too fast for you. It really helps improve your time, because you basically know ahead of time, are my limbs at a place where they are comfortable enough that they can execute something at X speed, right? It's really odd. Like, these connections that you wouldn't assume are being made actually do get made, kind of in like slow motion. It's very odd, very odd. And to be honest, like, it helped me much more than any sort of like stick control exercise of like just sitting with the pad ever did. The only thing that I ever really needed to just like sit with the practice pad in order to get were like basically flam taps, which actually are useful on the kit and are really good to get good at, because no one really plays them on the drums. And like, I still struggle with flam taps actually, and getting them like up to tempo, which are basically just this. So like a lot of that had like weird flam taps patterns in it. And then when you play it as groups of 3, I think they call it Swiss triplets. I don't think that. I know that. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. So I think I've talked enough here. At least for a while. Yeah, I'm not gonna put you through the process of what a practice section with the New Breed book looks like. I think I would rather play something to music, and then we can really Judas Priest break the law. We can see if basically my YouTube upload can skirt around the audio muting issue, which would be great, by the way, because then I'm gonna start like advertising the YouTube channel as well as the Twitch everywhere, because the YouTube channel will have all of the recordings permanently rather than Twitch, which only has them for like a week or 2 or something like that. There's, by the way, the other cat is now here attempting to find a wire that he can destroy. So if you see a different cat, your eyes do not deceive you. So I was trying to think of what would be best for me to play here to start out with. Again, I played the thing I really wanted to play as practice like a couple minutes before I started this, and my limbs were just not ready for it at all. So that makes me think I should probably start with something a little bit easier in some sense. Maybe it's Peter Criss, the Catman in disguise. Boo is kind of Peter Criss-like. He's got the correct color palette for it. Oh, there he is. Don't forget to change the name of your episode and the number of your episode. Did I forget to change the number? That's going to be very disappointing if I did that. Let's see. See, this is the thing, is I tried to do that. Oh, that's really bizarre. Wait a second here. Oh, Twitch has betrayed me. Twitch really has betrayed me. That is wild. Wow. So I actually, I'm very glad you said that, because I tried to change that, and apparently Twitch just hasn't listened to me. I started to see this, by the way, when I was looking up stuff to start to do the stream, when I was planning on how I was going to do this. Something that I saw was that basically like YouTube is actually maybe the better streaming platform now, which shocked me, because I feel like I kind of remember when YouTube started giving you the option to do live streams on that platform. And I remember it being kind of like dinky looking and very minimal and basic. And it didn't really look like it was working all that well. And basically, in the meantime, essentially the live streams on YouTube, they are as easy to interact with as an audience member, and then also as easy to sort of store or manipulate or do whatever with as an actual creator person. It's basically become as easy to stream from both the audience and the creator perspective as it is to just watch a regular YouTube video. Like, they've totally integrated everything. And so this is yet another thing that I'm now having trouble with, is like, I tried to change the title of the stream, so I don't know why it's different. Like, it's in my schedule as something different. So I don't know why that is. That's actually very frustrating. And of course, the whole reason that I chose Twitch was because less people are using it than are using YouTube. So I thought it would maybe be a smaller pool of competition. But I'm starting to think that maybe I should just run it all from the YouTube channel. That's neither here nor there. I'll have to figure that out in the logistics afterwards. But wow, yet another great example of how none of this works as well as one would hope in year of our Lord 2022. You would think that we would have had this kind of crap figured out by now. Okay, so I know I played this last week, but I just didn't. I thought I was going to have more time to warm up, and I just didn't when I got home. So I'm going to play Night Witches again by Sabaton, just because it gets the blood moving, at least in your hands. Good thing is that that's short, so I'll play that, and then I'll move on to some other stuff. It's only a couple minutes, and then there'll be some new stuff. Maybe I'll even at the end of this. I don't know. I might go for another run at the Glass Prison, the Dream Theater song. I'm not totally sure. I feel like I want to get it perfect, and I don't feel like I've gotten it perfect. And I know that the likelihood of that is very low, but I'm fine with that. I'm fine with low likelihood. But yeah, before I do any of that, I have to get my hands more warmed up. So, yeah, let's do Sabaton again. It's only like 3 minutes. I know everyone saw it last week, but I'll just have to budget more time for warm up in the future. Yeah. Oh well. See you on the other side. got some funny things about these cymbals. I think I hit them so hard sometimes that it'll like double trigger when I try to choke it. So like if you ever see me like constantly readjusting the wires beneath them, it's because I think they might be so worn out at this point that I've actually like made it so that certain positions are more finicky than others. So if it like moves forward, if the wire kind of twists too much towards me on this particular cymbal, it'll like it won't choke, it'll just make another sound when I try to grab it. Of course, now it's not going to do it when I actually try. Yeah, of course. Speaking of like funny 80s things, something I could try to do is come up with like a sort of neo 80s jam too, with some of the cornier sounds on these kits. Let me see. Let me go to kit. Oh yeah. Okay, here we go. We're going to play around with some different kits. I'm going to keep this on, but it's going to be kind of far from me. Let's see here. God forbid we put it on the Korean streamer light. Okay, it's down here. I'm going to shout. I don't know what that's supposed to be. It's a little John Bonham or something. I don't quite know. In my ears, that sounds incredibly bassy. It might not be fully translating, but that's what it sounds like to me. Maybe it's like a reggae kit. Maybe that's it. Bad boys! And the words of the prophets were written on the studio wall. Doesn't transition very well to the rest of that song. Let's see, what else do we have here? I want to find a real 80s, late period, yes, Bill Bruford style terrible Simmons kit sound. That's what I want to find. It's like orchestral. That's interesting. I don't know what that is. Is that what 808s sound like? I've always been sort of unclear on this. I don't know enough about like hip hop to. Is that the snare that I'm? Or maybe that's the hi hat. That's a kind of 808ish type hi hat. Maybe I'm wrong. It's so odd. like hand drums. Oh, I have to play around with that one. It's like a drum circle. That's too silly. I can't keep playing that. I'll just play that all night if I don't stop. Ah, there we go. Here we go. That's the a bit like Tainted Love. Yeah, it's that is officially the way to play Gary Pepperoni's New Breed, published by Modern Drummer. That is it. That is the way to play it. It matches the cover. It matches his photo on the back. It matches all of it. That's the aesthetic. The correct way to play it is on a reclaimed 1988 Simmons kit that you find from a garage sale where half the pads are broken, and that is the drum sound. That is the correct way to go about playing New Breed. That's how you should practice it. Okay, well, that was fun. I feel like I should probably do some actual playing now. Of course, I need to get back to my real drums, which I think is this one. It'd be really embarrassing if like that kit that I designed was like lost forever. No, that's it. By the way, this is like a weird construction of a custom kit that I made out of the default Elise's sounds, because I wasn't going for a very metal tone. I was simply going for a tone that actually sounded the closest to real drums. And of course, if you have any experience with real drums, you know how funny that is for me to say that, because these toms are like the most plink-plonky sounding fake toms. But these are actually, I think this snare is in the manual what they describe as the funk snare rather than the rock metal snare. And then I think these are like the fusion toms or something like that. So they sound like Billy Cobham's toms when he was playing on those like acrylic giant like 30-piece kits with Mahavishnu Orchestra. That's like what these toms are supposed to sound like, I think. So of course that should mean that like everything that I play should be like completely incomprehensibly fast and insane and just constantly doing like giant across the toms. Like everything I should play should be between the funk snare, the like harsh heavy metal cymbals, and then the acrylic sounding fusion toms. Everything should sound like Billy Cobham, which like I should be playing like in like an undersized yellow smiley face shirt, like whatever Billy Cobham was wearing during shows in the 70s. Like I think there's a drummer you could find. I can't remember who it is who said like Billy Cobham ruined a lot of careers because everyone heard it and thought that they could sound that cool and that they could play like that. And if you needed further proof of that, it's what I just did. Which is nowhere near close to how Billy Cobham is capable of playing. Okay, so I think the song I want to play is by another kind of more modern-ish. I guess they're technically kind of old men now, but I think they're great. Modern-ish proggy group in the kind of post-Dream Theater generation, I guess. Or maybe they're coeval with Dream Theater. Called Symphony X. They are... Sorry, I have like a huge tangle with my inners here. There we go. Yeah, I want to play a more modern song from a slightly older prog band called Symphony X. They're cool. They're sort of like, they have a lot of, similar to what we were talking about last week, kind of like Euro-centric kind of power metal-y influences, but they, with some of the sort of chuggier riffs and stuff like that, they're also clearly an American band rather than a European one. They're kind of a cool blend for kind of prog metal-y stuff. And one of the better vocalists, I would say, in metal, a man named Russell Allen. And then I would say a hugely underrated drummer on pretty much all of their albums, I think, except one. A guy, I'm not totally sure how his name is pronounced. I think it's Jason Rullo. Not Jason Derulo, the pop songwriter. Jason Rullo, who I never see anyone talking about, who deserves to be talked about because he's in this prog band, right, with like really incredible musicians. Similar with their bass player, a guy named Mike LaPond, who's a really fantastic player who I never hear anyone talking about. And actually, I would say the two of them together really deserve more credit than they get because they really have like, they're really like they're almost like a really kind of grooving, almost sort of older school of rock music kind of rhythm section. The playing is like incredibly musical and really sort of spacious and open and big and rich sounding in this genre where there's enough time signatures flying past you, there's enough sort of tempo changes and then fast tempos and stuff like that, where if he wanted to, he really could be just absolutely wailing away all the time. And clearly when you listen to some of the parts, you can tell that that kind of busyness is really in his skill set. But it's not really his bag. It's just not really what he seems to like to do. He's a much more, he clearly is much more in the kind of like John Bonham vein, right? Like that's really clearly what he kind of would like to sound like ideally. He doesn't want to sound like Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater or something like that. I mean, he's a really musical player. He leaves space for the other instruments, and the groove is really great. You can tell, even on a lot of their more modern albums, that his drums haven't been over-processed or quantized, because you can tell that his time is pretty great. Even on the album that I'm going to play from, you can hear some tracks where, like, they could have corrected his snare volume on a couple of fills and stuff like that, and they just don't, because it sounds great. It sounds like this natural, flowing thing, and there's no reason to go in there and like robotically make everything the same velocity or whatever. And I think the same things you can say about Jason Rollo go for the bass player Mike LaPond as well. Really talented, has all of the sort of prog rock and old like fusion-y almost chops, but also clearly just a player who's more concerned with sounding musical, sounding good, not sounding too busy. I mean, this is something where even my own kind of bad habits get in the way of this sometimes. Like the song I'm about to play, I have actually played it enough that for my own personal, sort of obsessive habits, I've really like changed how the main verse sounds when I play this. And the truth is, I actually like his more. Mine is much more sort of like technically tech metal influenced or something like that, which is basically that like the main part of the verse is like a very chuggy 1 or 2 or 3 note riff. And I like match that with the bass drum. And that's not what he does at all. He actually just like leaves just quarter note hi-hat and then tons of open space on the feet. He is not like, losing his mind on the feet like a super metal, techie player or something like that. He's just like grooving away like it's 1969 or something. I mean, there's double bass for sure. And he's got some good double bass chops. You can hear, I think literally on like the first Symphony X album, it opens and like the first drum beat is like just old school pedal to the metal, double bass. I think the first drum beat that you hear on track 1 of album 1 is something like that. I mean, of course, those feet were horribly unclean. Let me actually try that again, because that's going to bug me if I can't get up to speed on that. See, I mean, that's fast. I'm not even really fully comfortable at that tempo without having, like, warmed up hugely for that. I mean, I think even if I did warm up, I would really need to concentrate at that speed. I think that's like 180-ish BPM, which, like, that first album was before the era where they could have corrected it if it sounded bad. So, like, he's got the metal chops, but he clearly also just likes this older school rock and roll thing, you know, where he's just grooving really hard and he's hitting really hard and he's not too concerned with, like, coming up with the most complicated part. So he's, like, really musical, and I think basically just, like, the modern trend of everything being incredibly busy and throwing your sort of rudiment chops into every song, it just doesn't really apply to Symphony X. You know, they're one of the few sort of prog bands that I've ever heard, I would say even more so than something like Genesis or Yes, where they can be playing in a weird time signature and it flows so well and is so musical that you really don't notice. And Symphony X, I think, is the rare case of not only that, but also where the songwriting is so creative and interesting, where they can be playing in a weird time signature and you don't notice because it feels so natural. And then they can be playing in a common time signature and it feels weird. That's another thing that Jason Rollo does, is sometimes just, like, you know, the backbeat in certain parts of songs just drops out and gets shifted to another really weird place, you know? It's like in metal music, there's basically, like, two acceptable places when you're playing in 6/8 or 12/8 to put the snare, right? And it's basically, the two acceptable places are pretending that it's 4/4, even though it's not, or making everything into a waltz, right? And so, you know, both Lars Ulrich and Neil Peart probably have the most famous examples of turning 6/8 into a waltz, right? Which is in the case of the verses in One by Metallica, and in the case of Limelight by Rush. So I'll play something like the verse of One from what I remember, and then something like the verse of Limelight, so you can hear what I mean. So basically, you turn it into 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then the other one is you just pretend it's in 4, even though it's not. I mean, you can tell that these are so ingrained into the habits of rock that I was even sort of doing it a little bit, trying to play the Neil Peart part, where I just shifted the backbeat forward by one subdivision, which basically you're just pretending it's in 4 at that point, because you're basically going 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, right? Like the meta meter is that it's in 4. It's just that it's swung, right? And then basically within that, you know, you can play around. So like, what's the famous example on the drums? It's Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, right? Which actually just has, you know, the imitation 4/4, right? Where the backbeat's effectively on where the 2 and 4 would be. But basically they play around with the other stuff around it. So the foot is just doing a shuffle. Right? And then on top of it, the hand is doing a really weird thing. So that's like, you know, you can play around with it in the context of rock music, but those are basically the two acceptable places to put the snare. It's either you pretend it's a waltz or you pretend it's in 4. The interesting thing in Everybody Wants to Rule the World is how alien the hand is on the hi-hat. Which, if you didn't notice, is really a funky one, right? Because the logical place to put your hand is just to land on the downbeats with it. And like Symphony X is interesting because basically those are they'll like it'll be a measure of 6/8 or 12/8, and like the snare will be on, like, you know, the upbeat of like 4. Right? So there'll be Symphony X songs where it'll be like, or something like that. And then it'll also be like on the toms. There will be like weird stuff on the toms where like entire sections will have no cymbal work at all. So like you're like, wait, where's beat 1 again? Because like every like subdivision is just getting like whacked on the floor tom. So it's like there's no like there's no like place marker to tell you where 1 is or something like that. But then they'll be playing some like really wacky prog epic thing that's in a bajillion different time signatures, and it'll be like crazy musical. Like there's a solo section in this song which is in a beat of very slow 7, but with like a very metal drum pattern with like consistent double bass and quarter note, you know, snare on top of it, so you don't realize that it's in 7. Like it just grooves. Like that's the end, close to the end of the solo section, and that entire section I think is 7s and 5s, And like when you hear it in the context of the song, you're like, oh, it's actually like harmonically it really makes sense. It's all really musical. And it's very metal, but like, you know, that section in 7 is like very rocking. It's like an old Motorhead song or something. All sorts of weird stuff, you know? Yeah, it's fun. It's not super fast. It's not super crazy. I mean, again, you know, as you can tell, if it was super crazy, I wouldn't be able to play it because my feet aren't, you know, fast enough to hit some of the faster tempos that Symphony X plays. Though I wonder if I can hit it now. Almost. Oh my god. Double bass is the perpetual struggle. Okay. So I've done enough talking here. I'm gonna play the song. This is a song called Domination off of their album Paradise Lost. It is, again, we were talking about nerdy metal last week. It's just a heavy metal retelling of John Milton's Paradise Lost. I think it's like Domination's like the War in Heaven sequence. So there's going to be a guy yelling his head off. It's very musical, though. It's very, like, again, it's sort of more than the sum of its parts, because the songs are very heavy metal. But then if you listen, everyone's playing sort of like old school rock kind of stuff. The only thing that's particularly heavy about it is this chuggy riff in the verses. But, yeah, so this is an example of, like, really, really sort of musical, well-composed, punchy, modern prog rock music that doesn't go off the deep end into just like soloing and like wankery, right? But it's actually like very musical and very cool. And I think the band as a whole deserves more credit for it. And I think Jason Rollo deserves to be mentioned as the drummer, who really could be losing his mind back there, but is just grooving away and sounding amazing on like every song. So hopefully you'll hear what I mean. Hopefully I'll do it some kind of justice. I'll play for you, before I start it, I'll play for you something like what Jason plays in the verses. And then I'll show you how the part that I play is actually maybe less musical, even though it's more technical, right? And you'll probably see what I mean, because it'll probably groove worse than his. But yeah. I'll show you what I mean. I'll play kind of what he plays first, or what I remember it as, and then I'll play mine. So, pretty huge difference in what I play versus what he plays. His is, I think, much more musical. The only reason I don't play it is my kind of compulsion to play something more complicated there. Maybe that'll be my downfall in this playthrough. I've never played it with the Moises app, with the drums stripped out of the track. So maybe my version will really sound absolutely awful. We're going to find out in real time, though. Here we go. Domination by Symphony X. Oh man. Yeah, definitely should have warmed up before that one more. Wow. Vocals like Phil Anselmo. Yes. Um, the funny thing is, there's been like a Facebook group that I've been in for a really long time where people. It's really like a group that's focused on like progressive rock and metal as well as sort of power metal stuff because there's a lot of kind of overlap there. And I remember, I joined that many years after I sort of developed an interest in music like this. And the funny thing is, this was like years after this album by Symphony X came out that song is on. And it's so crazy because like it was years after and the debate was still like raging in this group. I think this album came out in like 2007 or 2008. And I think I joined it in like 2000. I joined this Facebook group in like 2013. And occasionally on threads and stuff, people would still get into arguments about how Pantera this album sounded. And like, man, I am all for it. Because to me, it's like, it's Pantera like medicinally mixed in with a dose of like everything else that I like. You know what I mean? It's not all Pantera, but it's like there's this growly, gritty, crazy vocal thing happening. And then the Dimebag Darrell thing on the guitar. It's this super groovy thing where it's like a fuck you groove on the drums, and then underneath it it's like kind of chuggy and weird combined with, I don't know anything about the guitar, like what sounds to me at the end of the riff progression like a weird kind of tapping thing and like 5 other things going on. So to me it's like everything that I like in one, because then it's in there with this epic prog rock thing and this also fast power metal thing. I just think it's so good. I'm also gonna, I think, play that one more time because I am really not happy with that play. That was literally like the second time that I've played that in years. So I'm gonna return to that once more. So here we go, round 2. God. See, the funny thing about the songs like this is that if you were just memorizing, you know, like some difficult licks or something like that, you would be in a much different place in terms of, you know, how quickly you could get up to speed on it. But again, it's really the fact that, like, you're talking about an arrangement in this case that doesn't really leave much room for, like, an individual player to, like, screw around with their own ideas, right? And, like, maybe tons of other drummers feel differently than me. But judging by the type of stuff that goes on most, you know, relatively internet famous drummers' Instagrams, I somehow doubt it. The problem is that, you know, it's an instrument where you can't, how can I put this? Everything is staccato, right? One stroke on a drum is one stroke on a drum, right? And, you know, there's bounce techniques and stuff like that, but you can't really get a sustain on anything, right? Even a roll, a sustained phrase, right? You have to constantly be moving your hands, right? There is no legato note, really, right? And so basically what you're constantly fighting against, again, maybe this is just me, but if you look at social media, I don't think this is actually the case. I think everyone is doing this, and it's why basically drums on social media look the way they currently do when you follow other players, is there is this temptation to be sort of constantly filling the space with whatever you can. And part of the problem is that, like, this is diametrically opposed to the type of talent or discipline that is needed to be in a band, right? Like, it is explicitly a sort of non-collaborative thing to sort of sit and invent what the coolest drum pattern for this part would be or something. Even at a relatively high technical level, I would say that a song like that requires real talent to compose something that is arranged in that way, right? Maybe it's not the greatest thing ever written. Maybe it's not, you know, the Brandenburg concertos or something. But I think it takes immense talent. And even something like that, right? What you're talking about is exercising immense discipline as a support player on the drums. It takes an immense amount of restraint, and even when the arrangement is technically complicated, you have to balance that against making sure that not every aspect of what you are playing is in and of itself technically complicated. Because basically, that's almost like letting a sort of ADHD mentality set in or something like that, where you are sort of constantly looking to sort of stimulate the senses of the listener by adding in a new element, something different or something like that. And so, like, part of the reason that I keep having, you know, I've played that song twice. I think I've made pretty much the same mistakes in each place. It's mostly actually just because basically you transition into a section, and then basically as the drummer, your mind is flooded with ideas for options of where you can go. And basically becoming good, as far as I can tell, is just an exercise in learning to not let that instinct win out, right? The more that I have, like, covered songs for Instagram or something like that, where, you know, almost all of these songs, I'm stripping the drums out through this Moises app, which, by the way, I keep saying this. This is what the app looks like. It's really useful. And what's actually been really revealing to me is that I strip the drums out, and then basically when I'm coming up with a lot of my parts, I think the better that my drum covers on Instagram have gotten, as the quality has gone up, it is actually correlated very strongly with me simply playing what is already present on the track, right? If you look back to when I first started posting, right, the first song that I put up was The Dance of Eternity by Dream Theater. That's a song where you can't screw around too much. So most of that is pretty close to the original track because the arrangement's just too busy. And then basically, like, one of the next covers I did after that was War Pigs by Black Sabbath. And the thought, of course, is like, oh, it's this old school rock track. It's super spacious, right? It's like old school kind of jam rock in some ways. It almost sounds by modern standards like you're listening to a jazz ensemble or something, right? It's like there's so much space in this track, and of course it's filled with drum solos and with weird fills and stuff like that. And so it's like, oh, well, I can like add my own flair in there. And if you listen to that, I mean, a lot of the like weird little drum solo parts that I came up with, you can hear it. Like, you can just close your eyes even and just listen to the recordings that I did. Like, a couple of them are like really struggling to be in time, right? Because of course these things were also not recorded metronomically. And so I'm like bringing some of these figures that I'm learning from like the books that I'm reading, right? You know, I'm like trying to bring in like world music influences. I'm trying to bring things in like, you know, bring things in fives from other books that I'm reading, patterns of 5 rather than straight patterns of, 2s, 3s, and 4s, stuff like that. And it's like, of course, this was recorded in a scenario where there wasn't a metronome and where Billboard was playing what felt really good and what felt really intense. And what that was mostly was really fast, dynamic single stroke rolls, and then stuff like do gaga go gaga go gaga go gaga go dun 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 dun, right? Like basically single stroke rolls and like big beefy hits on the toms, right? Stuff that sounded good, stuff that sounded cool, stuff that actually fit what was being played. It was not recorded to a metronome, right? And so like I'm trying to throw in my like, pseudo improv jazzy whatever, because I had just joined Instagram and it was like, oh, this whole new world of like show off drummers has opened up to me. And basically what the past year or so for me has been trying to like completely excise the influence of that kind of playing out of my life completely, because maybe that works for some people. That is not the path for me. The path for me is not like this, not to call out anyone by name. Maybe I'll save that for when I have some more viewers, so I can make some real enemies. But like this like gospel chops thing of like playing 200 BPM linear patterns and like metrically modulating and all of this stuff. It's like, again, I have it here somewhere. I would rather learn, the difficult art of metric modulation on the drums by diligently making my way through Gavin Harrison's Rhythmic Illusions so that I can learn to play it musically, rather than learning it from a piece of sheet music that someone posts on the bottom of their YouTube video where they are just like ripping over like their church choir or something like that. I mean, this is like the comedy of all comedies, is the way that like education on the drums in this way works. It's like stuff like Drumeo and stuff like that is like the exception to the rule, right? Like stuff like Drumeo is a fantastic resource. A guy like Mike Johnston is a fantastic resource. Even a guy like Craig, who's mostly doing like funnier stuff and more sort of straight up entertaining stuff rather than like educational stuff. These are like the exceptions that prove the rule. These are like the high quality exceptions. And then pretty much everything else you see is just like this show off fluff. And it takes a lot of talent to play that stuff. But the more that I play some of these cool proggy songs that are really difficult, the more that I understand the logic of actually respecting the intent of the artist. And for me, what that means is actually trying to understand why the original drummer played what they played. And that's much more important to me now than getting in my own little flair and my own little fills and stuff like that. To me, I think it's a much better marker for me personally in my progress to be able to play something to the level that I would consider like album recording level quality. That's much more important to me. Like if I can really nail a take in a way that is clean and actually sort of respects the intention of the original person who played on that track. And when you see live recordings of guys and they change their own parts, hey, power to them. They're the author of those parts. Maybe once they took it on the road and played it live, they realized that something works better sort of in their limbs. And so they change around what they play. Maybe they improv a little bit. That's that's their art. I'm willing to respect that. But for me, it's like I'm going to try to play something that at least approaches, the kind of thing that they would do in a recording because they're in the band and I'm not, right? It's like they know better to a certain extent. And so my metrically modulated fives that I tried to play in the solo sections of War Pigs, I'm kind of not in love with that anymore. In fact, I'm thinking of re-uploading some of those songs with new takes because I think I could play them better. They would be just as flashy, they would be just as cool, but guess what? They would actually sound really good. And I think I've developed some more discipline, right? It's like I'm not quite done with that Symphony X song. I might play it again tonight, or I might play it again at a different date because I think I can get it much, much closer, right? Sabbath recorded that first album in an afternoon, I think. I mean, imagine doing that, right? Like, imagine having that much influence from something that you did in an afternoon, right? It's like, I feel like that's really like a world historical type accomplishment to be able to do something like that, It's like, do you think when I don't know, I can't even think of another sort of musical type of accomplishment like that. It's like all of the other examples are almost like from other areas of life, right? It's like, do you think like the Bolsheviks? Do you think when they just like took over like whatever that assembly building was and were like, woohoo, we did it, we took over the government? Do you think that they were like, oh, we're gonna change like an entire century of history? You know what I mean? It's like there are certain things like that where it's just like some of the best stuff just comes from people doing something just on a laugh, right, which is just amazing in that way. And that's kind of also a mark against a lot of the way that a lot of this music that I enjoy is written now, is that it's really surgically poured over. And then once it's even recorded, you're sort of also surgically, pouring over it in Pro Tools or whatever, or in Ableton or whatever it might be. Like I am still a Luddite in that sense, right? Like I do think there's a case for the old school rock and roll way of doing things. I think I'm gonna go quickly chug some water, and then I will be right back. And I think I would like to do that song for a third time, and then I'll be done with it. But I'll be back in like a minute. Okay. So, I think I would like to play that song one more time, and I'll be done with it for tonight. But I think it's worth maybe going over some of the finer points of where I'm messing it up, so that I can at least sort of remember. So, let's see here. So the verse. So what I discovered on the second playthrough is the snare was too busy. I think I added that snare in when I first started trying to play this song years and years ago. And I think that I was uncomfortable with the feet. Having to do that pattern of like dun 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 dun. Those groups of three were really hard on my left foot. And I tried all sorts of stuff. I tried playing it with double bass and stuff like that to try to alleviate some of the like stress on like the muscles in my foot and my ankle and stuff like that. But now, as I'm realizing it as I'm playing, I'm actually kind of comfortable with that. So I was adding in all of these snare grace notes when I played it the first time around tonight. Lots of like dun da dun da dun da dun dun da da, stuff that was off of the backbeat. No reason to play that. It's just busying the noise. It's making it noisier. It's getting me out of tempo and out of time. It takes away from the power of the quarter note on the hi-hat, right? All sorts of stuff like that. Beyond that, what else here? Let me think. When it kicks into the solo section, it's doing that kind of slow oompa beat, like a train beat or something. There's a lot of... Sorry, the cat is just freaking out, in case you couldn't tell. There's lots of weird stuff on the ride cymbal there. If I feel myself start to get out of time, I need to just cool it on that for a measure. Because it's not worth getting these cool little flourishes on the ride cymbal in if like the time sucks and like the snare isn't even in the correct place or something. That I think will fix any of the time problems in the rest of the solo, because I will at least be sort of off on the right foot, which is ironic because it's actually my left foot. LOL. Isn't that the name of a movie? My Left Foot. It's about like the Irish potato famine or something, isn't it? I can't remember now. I swear that that's a thing. And then what else? Then it's really just remembering like where the hits are. You know. Yes, My Left Foot. Yes. With maybe Ray Fiennes is in it. I can't quite remember. Anyway. Then everything else is just remembering like where the hits are. Like when it transitions to 5, there's a lot of like da 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 da. Just remembering to like choke the cymbals in the right place, to not do a fill in the first couple of rotations of that. You know, giving the arrangement a second to breathe, because that's basically how Jason plays it on the album. Is he gives things a second to breathe, usually the first rotation or the first 2 rotations around, and then he'll come in with something on the 3rd and 4th rotations. So Daniel Day-Lewis. Well, Daniel Day-Lewis is just kind of like Ray Fiennes if you like stretched him out a lot. So I can see why I messed that up. Even though Ray Fiennes is better. Okay, gonna try that one more time, then we'll see what happens. It's a particularly ill-timed phone call. That's what that was. Oh, that's more like it. That is more like it. Ah, yeah. So that fixed probably about 85% of the problems I was having. Still some issues though, right? I mean, the arrangement is weird enough. So one really stupid thing that bothers me, there's a part transitioning out of the kind of straightforward section of the dueling guitar keyboard solo when it goes into 5. Da, 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 da. Is that in 5? No, that's in 6. That's 6 again. Kind of feels a little like the 5 later in the song, but it's not. So the 5 feels natural, and the 6 feels unnatural. See, I am smart, just like I was saying earlier. Something that really messes me up is I'm not getting to my hi-hat pedal fast enough off of the double bass. So you're supposed to match this little tinkly keyboard bass part, I think, on the hi-hat. And I can get to it by the second time, but I can't get to it the first time it comes around. And I feel like that is so dumb, but like it's a little psychological thing. There's a lot of this stuff with the drums where like it's not a problem. I can just play it open and it sounds fine, but for some reason it kind of puts me off kilter for the rest of the solo. Very odd stuff, but I think I fixed most of it. Where there's still some trouble spots. There are still some trouble spots in the kind of pre-chorus. I, with darkest insurrection, victimize. It's in 7 and then like 7-8 and like 7-4 and then like 9-8. I think is what it alternates between, or something like that, or maybe it's all in 7. And never totally comfortable coming out of that, but luckily it kind of breaks into that big open crash cymbal, da da da, my domination. So you get a little bit of a breather there, but the part is something like. So it's deceptive because it's a big open part without a lot of notes in it, and yet it kind of it sounds like it's just a kind of nice light easy 4/4, and it's not. There's notes chopped off of the end of each one of those, and that is still something I'm pretty sure it's all in 7. But as you can tell, I'm sort of partially doing it by feel, right? Because I can't tell you exactly what it is. So that's like a deep critical analysis of the trouble spots that still remain in that song. That was pretty close though. By the next time I stream, I guarantee you I will have it. I'll probably play it 2 more times on stream, and by the last time, it'll be a good take. I am going to get going in a little bit here, but maybe I'll just play one more thing, since that's effectively the only real song I've played besides Night Witches, but I played that last week, so maybe I'll try to leave you with something else. Let's see here. Oh, there's the cat. I'm going to see At the Gates soon, the old Swedish melodic death metal band, which is one of my favorite bands ever. So I'm listening to a lot of their most famous album, Slaughter of the Soul, which is what they're touring on for the anniversary right now. So they're going to play the whole album live. So I'll play you the legendary song with the great, metal vocal part right at the beginning. The title track, Slaughter of the Soul. Haven't played this in a while. It's very fast. It's got a weird feel because it's very fast, but it's in kind of a slow 6, but with a fast pattern within it. And you'll hear the fun vocal part right at the start. This could be really bad because I haven't played this in a while. Let me actually see how loud it is too, because it might be too quiet. No, that'll be good. Okay, here we go. That was 95%. Pretty good. Well, that was more than I had planned for tonight. I really have enough fun with these that I keep sort of accidentally doing more than I originally intended, which I guess is probably a good sign. If I'm hesitant to do this, but if I end up within the next year or so getting an okay number of viewers, I have a sneaking, horrified suspicion that I'm going to have to professionalize a little bit. But maybe make things a little bit less verbose. But again, I'm still kind of in the testing things out phase. I feel like this is okay. But, you know, I'm happy with this. Let me just look at something technical for a second here. Okay. So the frame rate on that camera is good. It's the one here that makes it look like I'm the that early film of the guy riding the horse. Just that collage of pictures that they played really fast or whatever. That's okay. This has been running for a while. I imagine all of the tech is running hot. That's going to be my going explanation with no technical knowledge at all. I added a lot of crap to Slaughter of the Soul there, but it turned out okay, actually. I think it sounded pretty much good. Stayed pretty much in time. So, yeah, maybe I'll brush up on that one, and then I'll continue to brush up on the Symphony X one for next time I do this, and then maybe I'll come prepared with some additional little treats as well. So, yeah, cool. Well, thanks for tuning in. I'm gonna get this onto YouTube as fast as I can, and thank you for joining, and I will catch you on the flip side. Bye.